If you pay enough attention to other people's commander builds, you'll have seen a lot of USS Gearing sailing around with Albert Gleaves at the helm. Gleaves, of course, is the torpedo focused American destroyer commander, and I assume most people who run him on Gearing do so because they want to buff the torpedo performance. But what if I told you you could buff the torpedo performance and the main battery performance with a different commander? Earnest E Evans, the reward for the calendar event that occurred in the July 2026 update. I think that calendar event is probably over at this point, so some of you may have him, some of you not. I would assume he's eventually coming to the game as a free-to-play commander. I believe the Dutch commander Firstner was also a calendar event at some point in the past and later became a free-to-obtain one. I suspect the same is true of Evans. I'm going to show you the build here as we ask our Smollin to get back. This is not a great opening to the battle, by the way. I just want to point that out. If you are two destroyers on the Two Brothers map, one of you needs to go down one flank, the other needs to go down the other flank. That flank over there with the A, B, C, D line, well, they have no spotting because the small end is coming over here, which puts them at a major disadvantage, particularly if the enemy sends one of their destroyers over that way, which they're going to. Anyway, as we launch these torpedoes at a number of battleships that have just appeared, I'll show you the build. We've got Evans with Chuck and Bay as inspirations, and there's a couple skills in particular that I think are beneficial to the Gearing. I think I talked about this before. This may be the same build I was using on the Fletcher, but I think it's even better for the Gearing just because it has more guns and more torpedoes than the Fletcher does. The first skill of note is in the second row, punching up. We've got Evans fully maxed, and this skill improves the destroyer's AP penetration multiplier by 15%. It's not like the original line of American DDs have the greatest AP pen known to man, but that certainly doesn't hurt. And then in addition to that, the maximum change to destroyer main battery shell damage against saturated hit locations scaling with saturation level is 10%. So in other words, the more saturated a ship part is, the more damage you're going to do to it with that skill up to 10%. And I suppose that's also helpful. But in the fourth row, his unique skill, Tin Can Sailor, which is a historical reference, improves the torpedo speed by 8%, improves the torpedo damage by 5%, and reduces the torpedo range by 8%. And then his legendary unique skill, Final Stand, increases maximum projectile damage bonus for your destroyer against enemy ships with higher max HP by 12%. And then, if you are reduced to below 50% HP yourself, you get a 10% buff to your main battery damage. So we've got both the main battery on the Gearing and the torpedoes buffed with this commander, and it's the torpedoes in particular, as you've seen there, with those hits against the battleships, we're already up to 83,000 damage. I think that is in large part due to a perma-flood on the one Montana we hit. And that guy may have been so enraged that he went AFK. I don't know at what point he did it, but I know at the end of this battle we'll see him with 0 XP on the leaderboard. Anyway, these torpedoes with this build, normally Gearing torpedoes have a range of 16.5, I believe. Well, because of the range nerf of the skill, these torpedoes only range out now to 15.2. Oh, how terrible, right? But the speed on these torpedoes. The base speed is 66 knots. With this skill in place, it's 74. These are almost the old Screamer torps now at this point. And because of the damage buff, they hit for a maximum simulated damage of 17,639, and they've still got their really good sea detectability range of 1.4. I think this skill buffs the torpedo power quite significantly, even though on paper it might not sound like much. That extra speed and that extra damage really goes a long way, particularly when Gearing is able to fire 10 torps in the water, and they range out to just over 15 kilometers. There's a couple more torp hits on the second enemy Montana. We're up to 132,000 damage with 5 torpedo hits and a perma-flood in 5 minutes. This is some great torpedo performance from the Gearing, I've got to say. The only downside to this build and these torpedoes are we've done nothing to buff the reload time. So the reload time is still 136 seconds, just over 2 minutes. Pretty long cooldown time. But the Gearing has really great main battery guns, and on this build, we've got a 2.7-second reload. And the base HE shell damage, don't forget, is 2200. That increases with the skills that we've already talked about. So I think Evans is a great commander for the original American destroyer line and the Gearing in particular. In fact, I think he's more valuable for this line than he is for the new alternative line. For that, I'd probably go with Halsey or Mordoff. Anyway, I want to talk about the particulars of this battle because it was a bit of a soul-crushing experience. You can see that one battleship at least has been eliminated from this flank. There's a Marceau lurking around somewhere. The Smalland that abandoned the other flank has been sunk already, so I'm the only destroyer left alive. And we've got an enemy cruiser, I believe, inside of our base, which is stopping our accrual of points. Not ideal. Also, on that flank that the Smalland left, I think there's only one friendly cruiser there versus another enemy ship. And probably the destroyer, there was one last spotted on that flank, is moving around somewhere over there. And so we've decided, because the base is full of enemies, who probably will go down thanks to the couple of battleships that are still hanging around the base, well, we want to go back in that direction, but something delays us, which is getting spotted by the Marceau. He's about to come around that island, caught sight of us, I guess, and maybe has now turned away. We've got some torpedoes in the water toward that Centurion, and man, do I wish these torpedoes would have been enough to take this guy out. Don't worry, he's going to come back later on in this video, and you'll see exactly what I mean. We do get a couple of hits, though. There's 2 torpedoes. We break some sort of module. We're up to 160,000 damage now. And here's Marceau, spotted by the last remaining friendly battleship we've got on this flank, which is a Borgonia. As you can see, he's hugging one of the Two Brothers Islands, bow tanking these 2 enemy battleships. I think he's getting lit on fire a lot, if I'm not mistaken. Not ideal for him. Borgonia, I don't think, is the type of ship that can really sustain that sort of position where it's just sitting bow on with its 32 millimeters of armor everywhere, especially if it's getting shot at by a lot of HE. Gearing guns, a little bit floaty. I don't know why Marceau is going to back it up and go in reverse here, but I think that'll make him a little bit easier for us to hit. Start landing some shells. Borgonia comes in there, though, secures the kill on the Marceau, and that is all I wanted to really see happen on this flank. I don't think there's any point right now in trying to push the enemy base, given that the Centurion and that Montana are both there, and given the fact that we've got 1 battleship and 1 cruiser left to defend our base, versus at least 1 battleship, 1 cruiser, and the last remaining enemy destroyer, which is undoubtedly still over there. So I figured we need to head back to our cap. Now, maybe if the situation were a little bit different and Centurion and Montana weren't here because they had been sunk already or otherwise cleared out, maybe we would have gone to the enemy cap to start flipping that. The Borgonia is certainly not happy with our decision to turn around. Keeps giving us a sarcastic well done, but in a capture the base mode like this, you often have to try to win the game by going back to defend your base. That's just the nature of this game mode. And we've got some torpedoes heading toward the Centurion and the Montana. Once again, we do not get any hits on that Centurion, which is going to be a real problem. Take a look at where he's headed on the minimap. You can see his bow is pointed right at the infamous channel on Two Brothers. And that channel, well, it allows easy access to the other base. Keep that in mind. The torpedoes, however, are going to find their mark on the other enemy battleship over there. That would be the USS Montana. He was at maybe about half health or so. Well, he's at no health now. He goes back to port. That's our second kill of the game. Nearly 200,000 damage done at this point. And we are quickly approaching the friendly base. We got some problems here, though. Whatever's happened in the interim, the enemy battleship that was over here is no longer here. He's been sent back to port. But we've got a very low health USS Indiana squaring off against a Colbert, which is from all appearances, melting the Indiana. And then we've got Venezia. I don't know exactly what his HP is, but he's off to the right-hand side of the screen, hanging out past the border of our cap, likely shooting at the Colbert. And I would think his sap, if he's running it, would be pretty effective against a lightly armored cruiser like that. Also, we look over there, we see a bunch of torpedoes sailing past the Venezia. That'll be the enemy destroyer, which is a Shimakaze. He's still lurking around our cap somewhere, which, at the time I was playing this battle, really, in my mind, justified my decision to turn around and run back toward our base. I don't know, however, looking back on this with the benefit of hindsight, whether actually pushing the enemy cap would have been the right thing to do. And we suspect that that Centurion is going to be coming down this channel at some point, but the twist and track indicator shows that it's pointing toward either the Colbert or the Shimakaze, so we don't think the Centurion is in that gap yet. We don't catch any vision of him, so I didn't want to launch the torpedoes. They do have over a 2-minute cooldown time, so wanted to hold on to them there. No sign of Centurion. We seem like we're good. The Colbert has gone down, so it's only the Shimakaze. And of course, our twist and track or perceptive indicator, whatever skill we're running on this build, is pointing in the direction of the Shimakaze. Still keeping an eye on the Centurion because we know he is undoubtedly coming down that channel and going to enter our base, which if he does, by the way, we are ahead of the enemy team on points, 405 to 370. But if this Indiana goes down, which seems pretty likely, the enemy is going to overtake us. And if some enemy ship gets on our cap, then we're going to stop accruing points from it. Meanwhile, the enemy cap is free from the presence of the blue team, so they will be able to accrue points from it no matter what. That is potentially going to be a huge problem. There's the Shimakaze torpedoes. The Indiana does go down, I think probably to a Shima torp, not exactly sure. Or maybe he sunk to the fire that the Colbert had lit on him. A little bit unclear, but Shimakaze should, for all I know, be headed toward our base right now. That would be the only move for him, I would think. And there he is. We run into him as he's headed straight for our base. Of course, Shimakaze guns do hit fairly hard, but the Shimakaze is no match whatsoever for the Gearing in a gunfight. It's just not even fair. Now, he does smoke up. He temporarily goes dark here for a minute. Apparently, we can't quite dial in the blind fire, which is unfortunate. Maybe if we had been able to sink him a little bit faster, things would be a little bit different, but there's about 2 minutes left to go in the match. We're going to have to sail into the Shimakaze smokescreen. We need to get him off the board if we want any hope of winning, and I think probably the point swing for sinking the Shimakaze is going to be enough to put the blue team back in the lead. We avoid his torpedoes. They are fairly easy to spot, and if you're in a maneuverable ship like this, fairly easy to dodge. Shima's all out of torpedoes and all out of HP. He goes down for our second kill of the game, 211,000 damage done. And unfortunately, now we see twist and track or the perceptive indicator pointing at the channel. That'll mean that the Centurion, who all this time has clearly been biding his time to use that channel and enter our base, he is about 2 seconds away from entering it. We're at 419 to 409, exactly 10 points ahead of the enemy. And again, we are accruing points every second or so from our cap not being contested. But this guy in the Centurion, this is honestly frustrating. I was very frustrated at the time that I was playing this battle because, as you can see, we've done a lot to try to turn the tide here. But this guy, thanks to impeccable timing and a smokescreen, is now going to enter our cap and start contesting it within the last 40 seconds. So maybe this is a mistake here on my part. I had no idea what this guy was going to do. He's concealed in his smoke screen. He could go in a straight line. He could turn in any direction. In any case, with less than a minute left to go, I launched the torpedoes because I think they would take about 30 seconds to traverse the distance between my ship and that target. And of course, they're going to go nowhere near Centurion. He does go in a straight line. Torpedoes completely miss. He's got way too much HP for us to even try to take down. Venezia's not going to do it either. And the mere fact that he's able to sit on RCAP for about 30 seconds is enough to put the enemy team ahead on points and win the game. GG, enemy Centurion. That was incredibly annoying. Very smart move on that guy's part. Excellent timing. Good map awareness. I guess I can't say enough about that. But for our part, we do finish top of the leaderboard with 2,077 base XP on a loss, 215,000 damage done with the Evans build Gearing. So, if you have Evans and you've been using him on the alt line of American destroyers, put him on the Gearing, put him on the original line. I think the torpedo performance and the gun performance buffs he provides are really good and make this line more effective. So I hope you enjoyed this tragic loss. If so, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.